Welcome one, welcome all to episode 13 of the Matty B Show. In today's episode, we are jumping into a time machine and looking at this day in history. So, get keen to look at all of the super interesting points of the 28th of February. Let's get into it. Alrighty. So, today, the date of recording of this podcast is the 28th of February 2020. Now, traditionally, the 28th is the last day of February. So I thought, you know what? Today, we're going to take a little bit of a look back into history and see what has happened on this last day of the shortest month of the year. But, of course, the calendar has stitched us up. Now, as it is 2020, it is also a leap year, meaning that tomorrow there is going to be a 29th of February. But I'm just going to get you guys listening to this podcast now. Forget that day exists. Tomorrow, for all that we are concerned, is the 1st of March. 29th of February doesn't matter, and we are looking at today, the 28th of February. Now, as it turns out, not a great deal has happened on this day. So I've compiled some of the important events, I'd say, and I've also compiled some of the more interesting points of the 28th here. So, let's start there. Let's start with the historical events of this day, all the big happenings that have happened in the world on the 28th. So we start off in 1915. World War I is raging around Europe. The Germans, the French, the British are in a stalemate on the Western Front. And on the other side, on the Eastern Front, the Germans and the Russians are in the same position also. And in a month or so, a little invasion to the Gallipoli Peninsula will be taking place, where the Anzacs will make their very first entrance into battle. But that hasn't happened yet, and we're all focused on the continent of Europe. The US war machine, still asleep. Still a couple of years until they get involved. So all eyes are on the Western Front. Who is going to break first? Who will be the first to flinch? And the first to flinch here are the French. They decide, you know what? Things are looking pretty tough at the moment. We need to launch an attack on the Germans. We need to gain some ground back. We need to show them who is boss. Now, if you guys are a history buffs, you will remember that all throughout World War I, the French were just horribly unequipped to deal with the circumstances. They were wearing blue and red uniforms, so they were easily identifiable. Their boots, not up to standard, didn't really have any helmets either. And it wasn't up until the end of the war that they really modernized their army and were prepared for what World War I really was. So imagine a army before this fact deciding to launch a massive offensive. Now there's a little region in Europe called the Champagne region, and I don't know much about it, but it was the place where the French wanted to push the Germans back to. They wanted to kick them out of the Champagne region because, I don't know, maybe they want a little bit of a drink. Just take a break from the war for a bit. Take a sip on some bubbly and she'll be right. So they decided to push them back. And on the 28th of February 1915, they tried that. They sent wave after wave after wave of French soldiers towards the German front lines. And they gained, all in all, a few hundred yards. So in terms of World War One, that's not bad. Sometimes you'd only gain a couple of yards, 10 yards, and they've done here a few hundred yards. That's a big piece of land in comparison to what the war was like at the time. But that isn't what makes this event newsworthy or fairly important in a historical sense. The importance here is the sheer loss of life that this encountered. This gain of a few hundred yards was at the cost of 50,000 casualties. That's 50,000 people injured, 50,000 people dead. That is a ridiculous amount of lives lost just for the gain of a couple hundred yards. And it really puts into perspective how terrible and how ridiculous the war in 1914 to 1918 was. World War One was a whole. It was terrible. The conditions were inhumane. The strategy was unethical, and just the whole mentality that men were just numbers, just little dots on the battlefield who could be sacrificed at any time was quite despicable, quite disgusting. And 50,000 casualties for the gain of a couple hundred yards. And the sad thing is that continued on for years and years and years. That never stopped, really, until the US got involved in 1917 and were able to finally push the Allies over the top to get that victory. But, as we all know, that didn't really last long. But not to worry at all, because we're skipping over World War II when looking at February 28, because not a great deal happened during this specific day, or anything of massive historical importance. Of course, the war, they didn't just pause it on February 28th each year, but there wasn't any massive battles or massive events that took place at this time, and that is probably a good thing. So we're skipping forward all the way up to 1953. And on the 28th of February, 1953, Watson and Crick discovered the chemical structure of DNA. Now that is actually very, very important, because now that we know a lot about DNA and we know the structure of it, how it works, how it is built, the fundamental building blocks of life on Earth, we can try and understand it a little bit more. Try and, help people in many ways. This led to many advances in health technology and really just in understanding how the human body would work and react to certain things, which is super important when considering different treatments and considering what to do next when coming up across an illness. And this is a very important historical moment, because it really gave us like a snapshot or a picture of what we are really made of, what makes humans so special, what makes life so special. So that is a great historical event that has occurred on February 28th. Now, we're going forward 14 years. It is now 1967. And on this day, in 1967, there was a big, long, lanky man in America doing his job, and doing his job very, very well. We are, of course, talking about the great man, Wilt Chamberlain, one of the greatest NBA basketball players in the history of the game. He was so statistically dominant that some of his stats look absolutely unreachable. He, of course, has a 100-point game in his resume. The closest anyone has ever got to that is Kobe Bryant's 81 points. And recently, in the past, 5 or so years, the only person to get anywhere near that was Devin Booker with 70. Now, if you consider the fact that Devin Booker scoring 70 is impressive, but the fact that he had still to get 30 more points, which is what most elite players get in only one game, it really, just demonstrates how much bigger, stronger, faster, and skilled he was compared to the rest of his competition. And Wilt Chamberlain will, of course, go down as one of the all-time greats in basketball. But in 1967, we just think he's really good. We're not quite sure that he's going to be one of the greatest basketball players of all time just yet, but we know he's damn good. And we know he is damn good because on the 28th of February, 1967, he sinks an NBA record 35th consecutive field goal. That means he's taken 35 shots and all 35 of them have gone in. He hasn't missed one yet. So hitting 35 shots in a row, having 100% accuracy, very, very impressive, and looks to be something that probably, knowing today's game full of three-pointers, full of long-range shots, won't be broken anytime soon. You're not going to have anyone really taking any under-the-basket shots that often. You're not going to have someone take 35 field goals under the basket anymore anytime soon. I guess in the past couple of years, the person that's looked most likely to break that was DeAndre Jordan when playing with the LA Clippers. He had the highest field goal percentage of all time in a season, upwards of 70%, and he was looking fairly likely, not fairly likely, but looking like the most likely person to do so. But, of course, he has kind of fallen off now. He's starting to get a little bit older. He's not as dominant or athletic as he used to be. So he is probably not going to break that record anytime soon. And I guess anyone else in the league currently that looks like doing that? Not really. I mean, you got to think of someone like Andre Drummond or Nikola Jokic, Clint Capella, but at the same time, I don't think that they really have the ability to hit 35 straight shots and just be as dominant as Wilt Chamberlain was against his opponents, which is a testament to how good that man was. He was incredible at the game of basketball, and you've got to look back and say, wow, I am impressed. All right, 1984 now. What happened on February 28, 1984? Well, it was the 26th Grammy Awards. And this particular Grammy Awards show was memorable for one, Michael Jackson winning 8 Grammys. 8 individual wins at one, that's right, just one event. Now, that is very, very impressive. Now, of course, he was all the rage at the time. He was a very, very popular musician. I wasn't alive in 1984. I can't really give any perspective onto how good he was or how massive he was, but I'm sure if you ask your parents or even if you were around back then when Michael Jackson was popping off, you can probably see how significant this event was in history, because 8 Grammys, let me tell you, that is a lot. Now, this came well before he got accused of, touching kiddies, but I don't know how we should look at this in the present day. Every time you bring up his name, it's a very contentious topic at the moment. You have his diehard fans saying, no, the things he is accused of definitely didn't happen. He is a pure-hearted man. He is a angel. He would never do anything of the kind. He would never hurt a soul, never hurt a fly. But then you have the people who aren't necessarily as infatuated or influenced by him saying, look, looking at the evidence, looking at some of the eyewitness accounts, looking at all of this stuff accumulated over the years and years that this was looked into, maybe it is a fair assumption to say that he might have touched those kids, man. But look, he's dead now, so we can't really find out, I guess. We'll never know for sure. All we can trust is the information that is presented to us now, all the information that we have at hand, and we don't really have too much of that at hand, seeing as though most of the time the evidence that we are presented is from those who were directly affected. Now, we can't, of course, negate what they say just because Michael Jackson can't rebut the argument, but also listening to only one side of the argument is very dangerous. Personally, I kind of tend to lean on the side that he probably did do those things, which is a shame for the entire generation of people who grew up thinking he was this god, who grew up thinking that he was, this untouchable, pure person, which is a shame for them. But at the same time, you kind of got to look at the facts here. But nevertheless, 8 Grammys in one award show is very, very impressive, and you've, no matter your view on him, have to applaud the greatness that is associated with him and his music. I hope you guys are enjoying the episode so far. This is the Matty B Show, coming from Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, and Whooshkaa. If you have any questions that you would like answered on the podcast, make sure you send them in to mattybpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure to follow me on Facebook, The Matty B Show. Make sure to also follow me on Instagram, The Matty B Show there as well. I'd love to see the support grow. It would be great to see. But with that being said, let's head in to the rest of today's episode. Welcome back from the break, everybody. Let's jump in to our next historical event, and trust me, this historical event is one of the most important things that has ever happened on this earth, one of the most memorable, one of the most amazing things I have ever heard. Now, in 1990, on February the 28th, the Dutch police are just doing their thing. You know, they're in the Netherlands having a good time, riding bikes, probably smoking a little bit of weed. Just chilling, doing whatever Dutch people do, doing that weird sport where they jump over the river with a pole, right? Just chilling, having fun. And then all of a sudden, the police, they accidentally stumble across a bag. Now, in this bag is some cocaine. And of course, cocaine, it's illegal. It's an illicit drug. So they say, you know what? It's time to confiscate this, find out who brought this here. This isn't acceptable. But they run into a problem. And this problem, it's pretty big. And by pretty big, I literally mean pretty big. Because on February 28th, 1990, the Dutch police seized over 3,000 kilograms of cocaine. Now, that is 3 tons of cocaine. And 3 tons of cocaine costs quite a fair bit of money. Let's completely forget about the space required to hold 3,000 kilograms of cocaine, and whoever thought it would be a great idea to smuggle this into the country, because that's not really what matters here. I want to talk about how much this cocaine was worth. So, In simple terms, 1 gram of cocaine costs around $100 on the streets. And this is as of results that I could find closest to the date, which was 1990. I could find some results from 2001. So about $100 per gram of pure cocaine. That's sold directly to a street user. Now, that's quite a bit of money. But there's a little bit of math involved, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'm not quite sure. But essentially, if you were to have 100 kilograms of cocaine, that has a street value of $13.3 million, right? Now, that's a lot of money, and that's a lot of cocaine. But guess what? We've got a lot more where that came from. So we do a quick bit of math to figure out how much this 3 tons of cocaine was worth. And it was worth $39 billion. $39 billion worth of white powder was found by the Dutch police on the 28th of February, 1990. Now, let's put that in perspective. We are looking at every single country in the world right now. All 195 of them. All speaking different languages. All coming from different areas, having different cultures. Well, in terms of GDP, gross domestic product, this 3,000 kilograms, this 3 tons of cocaine would be the 92nd largest country in the world. So there are roughly 100 countries worth less than 3,000 kilos of cocaine. Now, that is 3,000 kilograms worth of cocaine from 2001. And this is in comparison to what the countries are worth now. So if I was to do a little bit of extra math and account for inflation and all of those sort of things, this cocaine would likely be higher on this list. It would not be 92. It would probably be higher, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, if that doesn't surprise you enough, there are 54 countries in Africa. Now, Africa, it's seen as one of the most impoverished continents on this planet, and that is a shame. It's definitely something that we need to fix in the future. But with that being said, their GDPs are kind of low, and we can compare our 3,000 kilograms of cocaine to all 54 of these countries. And you know where the cocaine ends up? Number 13. If you were to plop this cocaine down somewhere on the earth and say, all right, this is a country now, and it's part of Africa, it would be the 13th largest country in Africa, which is a joke because there are 54 countries there. How can some white powder be worth more than nearly all of the countries in one whole continent? That is ridiculous. And it is by far one of the most important days in history. Not really, but it's just definitely something really interesting to look at. Super fun to take a deep dive into. I had a lot of fun trying to calculate how much this cocaine was worth and how much it would be in comparison to some of the countries on our planet. And that's crazy to think that it would be 92nd out of 195 and 13th out of 54 looking at Africa. Wow. That is very, very cool. But also not cool. You know, don't do drugs, kids. It's not good for your health or something. Don't do drugs. That's a Matty B Show approved message. Don't do drugs. All right, sweet. Moving on. It is now the year 2012. The year that the world was supposed to end. The year that the Mayans predicted that the calendar finished and everything would just kind of cease to exist. Well, I can tell you I'm recording this episode in 2020. That didn't happen. But something important did happen on February 28th, 2012. And that was the discovery of, wait for it, the largest prehistoric penguin. It's called the Kairuku Drenebififififififi. I'm close enough on that. You can give it a Google yourself if you want. And this prehistoric penguin was nearly 5 feet tall. So this penguin was as tall as a bloke, as tall as a short guy. That is crazy. Could you imagine walking down the street and then there's a penguin and you're like, oh yeah, it's a cute penguin. But as you get closer and closer, this penguin keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're like, oh, maybe it's just a really big penguin. But then you're standing next to it and he's up to your shoulder. And you can have a conversation with this prehistoric penguin who is an absolute giant, an absolute tank of a thing, because he was from prehistoric times. I don't know what happened to him. He probably died off, unfortunately. Rest in peace, prehistoric penguin. But at nearly 5 feet tall, this was one of the major archaeological discoveries of 2012. And it so happened to be on this day, on February 28th. So congrats to the world for doing that on this day. Love a bit of penguin. Moving forward to 2016 now. Now, 2016, only 4 years ago. And it was the 88th Academy Awards. So we're looking at the Oscars now. And this is a very special Oscars because not only did Spotlight win Best Picture, and I think we all remember the debacle that was Best Picture at the 2016 Oscars. They got the people who directed La La Land to come up to the front because they thought they won the Oscar. No, they didn't. They read the wrong card, and the people that won Spotlight were the actual winners of Best Picture. So there was this whole mess where Spotlight had to come up on the stage, La La Land had to get off the stage, and it was, one of the best mess-ups of all time, really. I don't know how the biggest, most important Academy show in the world can mess that up. Oh, yeah, we really don't know who won, but, should be right, hey. It's an all-time bugger up. It's a classic. I think we'll be looking back at that one for years to come and say, you know what? Not great. They didn't do well there. But there was actually also another big event on that day. Now, Leonardo DiCaprio, one of the world's most esteemed, acclaimed actors of the past 20 to 30 years, finally, after years and years and years of not winning one, finally won an Oscar for Best Actor for his role in The Revenant, where he fought a bear for a bit, then he did some pretty gruesome stuff, then he played with the bear again. And that was, surprisingly, the first time that this actor who was seen to be, one of the all-timers, one of the greatest actors of our generation, finally won an Oscar. And, good on him for finally doing it. Congrats, Leo, the heartthrob of the 90s, finally won a bloody Oscar after all those years on February 28, 2016. Now, the final historical event that we are going to look at today happened last year in 2019. And, of course, it surrounded our two favorite people in the entire world, US President Donnie T. Trump and Kim Jong-un. Now, for a little bit there, Donnie T and Kimmy, they looked like best buds. They were holding hands, kissing each other, talking about how this was a new period in history where the US and North Korea were going to be mates, where they were going to be friends, and they were going to, help each other become better people. When in reality, what that meant was Donald Trump was going to try be a little bit of a dick to him to try get him to get rid of his nukes. And I guess Kim kind of saw through this, and he said, you know what? We've got our summit coming up in the next couple of weeks, and this summit, its only purpose is to build relations between the two countries and hopefully make positive change. Well, guess what? Donald Trump was like, you know what? He's got a big red button and I don't like it. And Kim was like, you know what? you're an Orange Ranger, and that called off the historic meeting. This summit was almost 50, 60 years in the making. It was going to be one of the most momentous occasions in history between these two countries, who finally, after years of bickering, years of threatening and increasing threat of nuclear war, held hands and said, hey, we're buddies now. But the two most volatile, emotional leaders in the world just had their egos get in the way, and this summit, it ended. Now, of course, you guys will remember, the summit did go on a couple months later, but at this time, on February 28, 2019, everyone was a bit bummed out that this a great thing that was supposed to be happening was no longer happening because of the two children who were running these two countries. So that's been all of the historical events of the 28th of February up until now. Who knows, on the 28th of February in the future, something else with big historical importance might happen. But we just never know until we get there. But you know what? I decided, let's look at some historical birthdays from this date as well. But there aren't many. I'll be completely honest with you. There are only 2 birthdays that we are going to look at today, and that is because I really didn't recognize anybody else. These are just the 2 people who I was like, oh yeah, I remember who you are. Now, they're both sports stars, so don't judge me on that one. But I'll give you a little bit of a overview of who they are, what they do, and why they were born on the 28th. No, wait. No, I'm not. Not about why they were born on the 28th, because we all know why they were. But the first birthday we're going to look at today is happy birthday to Mario Andretti. Now, he is an Italian-American race car driver. He won the 1969 Indianapolis 500, but was also the 1978 Formula One World Champion. And historically, he's pretty much the only decent Formula One driver that has ever existed. He really is the only one who has ever looked any good, and that has been recorded quite heavily over time. And, you're probably thinking, why does that matter? Well, it matters because Americans always pull a hissy fit whenever Formula One comes up, saying that it's unfair that any American driver can't get into it. They say NASCAR is the most important car racing sport in the world, when in reality, look, it's probably not. But they always cry and moan that the fact that the Formula One grid isn't full of Americans, and everyone always points out to them it's because your American drivers aren't good enough, which is a bit of a sore spot for them, I would say. But once upon a time, they did have a really great Formula One driver, Mario Andretti, a world champion, and for the foreseeable future, the only American world champion. And that means today is his 80th birthday, so happy birthday to him. And on 1999, February 28th, Luka Doncic was born, the Slovenian basketball player who has set the NBA alight the past 2 years. He, of course, was the EuroLeague MVP in 2018 and is also the 2019 NBA Rookie of the Year and a first-time All-Star here in 2020. An absolute legend, Luka legend we like to call him. He is absolutely incredible. Well on his way to becoming the best European player of all time, if not one of the best basketball players of all time. Now, that's definitely way too early to say, seeing as though he's only in his 2nd season. But look, if he continues to average 25, 9, and 9 for the rest of his career, all I'm saying is that's pretty damn good. So happy birthday to Luka. He is, how old are you today? You are 21 today. Welcome to the gang. Now, that's all of the birthdays we really had for today. I'll be completely honest with you. I really didn't recognize anybody else who was born on February 28th. And I'm not quite sure why. February 28th just seems like a little bit of a disappointing day. when it comes in terms of birthdays, or maybe it's just me not being well enough versed in who actually is important in this world. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe in the future we'll have a big dog born on the 28th of February. But now it's time for our classic segment here, What Matters. Welcome to What Matters, the segment where I, Matty B, am grossly unqualified to answer the important questions that you ask me. But still, I'll do it. Alright, welcome to What Matters, everyone. And today we have our question sent in from Roy. Now, Roy, thanks for sending in a question. Really appreciate it. Hope you're having a good one. And he says, "Hey Matt, you have mentioned that you live in Australia, which is a beautiful country." Yeah, it is. Thanks for that one. But if you had to flee the country and move to another one, where would it be and why? Well, thanks for the banger question, Roy. Really appreciate it. Hope you are having a good one. And I, to be completely honest, I don't know. There are so many different countries in the world that I think would be really, really cool to visit. I think predominantly the one that springs to mind first of all is the US. I think there are so many things that I love that come out of the US, the NBA, the NFL, lots of the music I listen to out of the US. I think for as much as the US cops criticism for some of the things that happens there, I think overall probably one of the better countries in the world to live in. But with that being said, there still is that crappy stuff. Living conditions aren't always the best. Flint, Michigan, for example, ain't got no water. And I guess the cost of living is a little bit expensive there as well, especially things like healthcare. Don't want to really run the risk of having to catch an ambulance then not being able to afford it. So I think the US, sick for a holiday, not so good if you want to live there and you aren't rich. If I was like a billionaire, yeah, hell yeah, I'll go live in America. But at this point in time, I'm no millionaire, I'm no billionaire. So I think I'm going to rule the US out for now. I think tons of like their Western European countries are just really nice, really cool countries. I think France, Germany, Belgium, Spain, those sort of countries would be really nice. But then again, the one thing that worries about me there is the language barrier. And not that I'm against learning a different language, but preferably would like to go to a country where I can just keep speaking English. I think my mum is from the Netherlands, so I think the Netherlands would be a really cool country. I definitely want to go visit there someday, especially because they've got that 3,000 kilograms of cocaine, and 3 tons of cocaine, 92nd biggest country in the world, 2 countries in one. How good? But I definitely think if I were to move to Europe somewhere, it'd be the UK, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, something there. English speaking, they sound weird, but I'll take it. Fairly sweet as countries there. But in the end, those wouldn't be the countries that I would end up picking. There are 2 that I just can't split. I really just don't know which I would want to do, because there's pros for one, pros for the other, and that is New Zealand and Canada. Now, they both seem like awesome places full of great people. So I'm not too worried about that aspect of life. I'm really just trying to think about the really nitty-gritty, the specifics of everything, because, well, New Zealand is ranked consistently as one of the happiest, best countries in the world, one of the best places to live, and then that's the same with Canada, but just on a larger scale, lots more people there. On one side, New Zealand is just like home, just like Australia, and I think I wouldn't feel too homesick. I think it's very similar to over here in Australia, and I wouldn't feel too out of place, except for the weird accents that they have. Oh yeah, fish and chips, bro. But I think New Zealand is a great country. Would love to live there. And then on the other hand, you got Canada. Canada is bigger, and I would say probably has some cooler stuff just because of the fact that they're in North America, right next to the US, and are also have the larger economy, more people, more larger economy, just more opportunity for things and more opportunity to become successful and experience things. But it's also freezing cold there. I don't know. This is tough. You've put me in a rough spot here, Roy. You know what? I'll make a decision for you. All right. No, okay. I would pick Canada. And I would pick Canada because of all of the different opportunities there and the fact that it's a completely new experience. And I think moving to New Zealand would be a little bit like moving out of home but into the same home. And I think experiencing Canada and all that it has to offer would be really, really cool. Don't need to worry about dying or anything over there because you got free healthcare as well. They'll look after me. And I think for sure, Canada, definitely pick Canada. Want a new experience. I'll put up with the cold. I'll be right. Even though coming from literally the hottest continent/country on earth, should be right. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But Canada is where I would want to go. And then I guess if I ever got homesick, it could come or go to New Zealand. It'd be a little bit like Australia, so that would be a positive there. And look, New Zealand's also a very beautiful country. I think it'd be cool to go visit there someday as well. Go visit Hobbitville or something. Do some bungee jumping. I don't know. I think that's what they're famous for. But that has been a great question, Roy. Really appreciate it. If you guys want to send in your questions to me, that is maddybpodcast@gmail.com. Send your questions in. Questions about anything. Could be about where I wanted to live in a new country. That'd be awesome. That was a great question that we had today. It could be about politics, could be about sport, could be about your life, literally anything at all. Send your questions in. But that has been the Matty B Show for today. Thank you all for listening. This has been a banger episode looking at the 28th of February across history. So if you guys want to, make sure you follow me on Facebook and Instagram, the Matty B Show on both of those platforms. Also, leave us a good review on wherever you guys get your podcast from. I would really appreciate that. But with that being said, I hope you have had a great week. I hope you have a great week. And I will speak to you all next time on the Matty B Show. And that has been that.